Hello, and welcome to a post-season draft analysis. I'm Zan, the former coach of the San Diego Hydres at this point, and welcome. If you haven't seen one of these videos before, after I have a solid draft run, usually through getting at least into quarterfinals, I like to kind of do a recap of my team, look back at some of the good and bad moments of the season, look back at the Pokemon we used, and see if they actually did what we wanted them to or not, and how well the team functioned as a whole, as well as just kind of looking at our stats for the season. So I will say not a whole lot's going to be happening on the screen. So if you'd like to minimize or, set the phone down if you're watching on mobile and go do something else, just listen along. Treat it like a podcast. We're just going to sit here, talk about some Pokemon. I know these videos are they at least get a few views. I don't even know that everybody that watches the games watch these, but I do appreciate you if you are sitting here listening. You want to hear me talk Mons. So, spoilers for the finals if you haven't seen it. We lost. We lost in the UNPL finals for the third time in a row. We've had an academy season, a spring fling season, and now a regular season, all three, where we climbed all the way to finals just to lose it. So I can't say I'm not slightly frustrated at that, but honestly, props to our opponent who we played in the finals, Crep. Team was incredible, gameplay was incredible, build was incredible. I looked at it after the fact and I was like, oh, there's such a small chance of me winning this, even if some of the lucky things that happened didn't happen. I think it would have been a hard uphill battle. Regardless, though, we ended up with, I believe there were a total of 14 Pokemon we have to talk about today, so quite a few. Mainly because we dropped 2 1-pointers. So the way I like to rank things is there's going to be one MVP chilling at the very top of the list. We'll get there toward the end, of course. We've got the amazing Wood Use again. These are Pokemon that went above and beyond what you would expect them to do. So a little harder for a Pokemon like our Uber to land here. But a little easier for low tiers to land up here because they do way more than what they costed, right? We've got the better than expected Pokemon that I drafted for a specific reason, and they went past that specific reason, actually did good things for me, swept, did some things that I enjoyed and appreciated that I didn't really expect of the Pokemon. Did its job, and that's it. It's kind of our baseline tier. That's just where if we drafted a Pokemon, that Pokemon did what we wanted it to do. It gets to land there, it gets to hang out. We didn't really expect too much else of it, and it didn't perform any better than what we kind of saw it to do. And then our bottom tier is just called disappointing this time around. I've called it like the fraud tier in the past. I don't think any of our Pokemon that we had this season are technically like frauds. I just think some of it's user error and some of it's just the matchups when you were allowed one restricted Uber. Kind of the prep changes quite a bit. So I will say some Pokemon that I thought would be better were definitely not as good as I anticipated. So we'll go ahead and get started. The first one is going to be a quick one. It's Eelektrik. I'm going to put it in, did its job, I guess. We had Eelektrik before we did our drops. I believe we dropped everything on week 4 going into week 5. So we just had to make a lot of room for the new Pokemon to come in. We needed those extra points. Eelektrik really wasn't on our team for much of a point anyway, to be honest with you. I had Terra points with my original team that gave me 1 point left over. So instead of getting a 2-point Pokemon, I wanted 2 1-pointers so that I could have a 1-point Terra Captain and thought I'd be funny with it. And because of that 1 point, obviously we had 1 more point left over. My team was weak to Eelektrik, my team was weak to flying, and my team was weak to ground. So if people are just throwing everything in a prep sheet, they're going to see that, right? So I thought, well, if I'm not going to be bringing this 1 point anyway, I might as well draft something that makes it look like I'm less weak to these types. And what I typically do when I prep is I'll take the meme Pokemon off of a list just so they don't cloud my judgment and what I think a Pokemon's weak to. And that's what I was hoping was people would prep for Eelektrik or at least have it on the team sheet so that they would not think I was as weak to certain types as I was. Whether it worked or not, I'm not totally positive. I haven't went back and reviewed those games. But hey, it might have scared something off once. And speaking of 1-pointers, we have Dewpider. I wanted a web setter for this team because there are a lot of item lock Pokemon and Ubers, although this league there were significantly less or 2 less because only 1 Ogerpon form could be drafted. So there was only, I think, Wellspring running around, which meant Hearthflame and Cornerstone were not able to be webbed. I really liked this into the Palkia matchup, but I didn't end up bringing it. And then I ended up bringing it into the Dialga matchup, and it actually did huge work because my opponent also had a Booster Energy Pokemon. So I absolutely loved it there. I've had a sticky web video that I've got all the recordings for. I just need to actually edit it together. So I'm hoping to get that at some point because I do mention Dewpider. I think when your team is pretty much complete and you don't have a whole lot of room for other things, especially in leagues that allowed you to draft up to 12 Pokemon instead of being strict at like say 10 or 9, I think there's definitely room to pick up these one pointers that do specific things that if your opponent doesn't prep for them, it's gonna kind of ruin their day. And I think sticky web is a big thing for that. If you don't have good hazard game, and your opponent doesn't have good removal, then they're probably not going to bring it, especially if they have to shoehorn it on something that would like to do something else. So I just really like the idea of webs as a one pointer. And I think the options were like Dewpider, Cricketune, which I'm not a Cricketune believer at all. Cutiefly, which was like the fastest web setter. And Swadloon, which is bulky, I say in quotations, with Eviolite because it has an awful typing. But it could at least take a hit and maybe do some annoying things and be bulky, especially if it's a Terra Captain, right? But I ended up going Dewpider because Dewpider actually does decent damage because it is only a little bit weaker than Araquanid on the special side. So Water Bubble just, makes it reasonably strong. So I like the idea of Dewpider. Now, in practice, it was only good in one matchup. It failed us. It should have gotten one KO. It ended up going 0-1 in the one game it was in because Manaphy crit it. But hey, it got to set up webs, and those webs ended up stopping Valiant from getting a speed boost, and really just let Gliscor run crazy on my opponent's team. So I did enjoy that. Next up, we've got Sinistcha. Sinistcha, I'm actually going to put in the disappointing tier because I didn't bring it. I didn't bring it a single time, and I would say up there in the top tier Sinistcha fans of all time. Ever since this Pokemon has come out, I've loved it. I've used it in VGC. I've used it in singles as a Terra Captain, like in low tier Terra. I think it's absolutely amazing as a Terra Cap. The only problem it has is getting poisoned and going into Calm Mind Wars with Pokemon that resisted Stool Stab, right? So outside of that, I think it's great. I love Sinistcha. The problem is, without Terra, it has a lot of weaknesses, and a lot of common weaknesses is that things like knockoff, and ghost coverage in general is pretty easy to throw on a team. It's weak to flying. It's not really weak to fire, but it's weak to ice. And this team, if you've watched any of the battles, this team is already very weak to ice. So people didn't have to do any extra prep to be able to deal with Sinistcha. And I already had Calm Mind on like 2 or 3 other Pokemon, so it's not like Sinistcha was bringing anything new to the table that I didn't already have. So I ended up making changes for another grass type, and then needed to kind of open up the team to kind of replace my fire type, because we'll get to that in a moment. But I just think these are the Pokemon that weren't really doing it. Sinistcha, at the end of the day, it needs the Terra. It either needs the Terra or it needs to be in low tier, like where Sinistcha is a mid top tier Pokemon. Else it's just not really worth running. I'll be honest, it's too many weaknesses, it's too predictable. Without Terra Blast, it actually has trouble with coverage to hit full teams, so definitely a little bit disappointed there. Next up, we have Armarouge. So this is the last of our drop Pokemon. Armarouge, this is one I haven't thought about. So I'll be honest, I haven't thought about this list at all, other than who I think the MVP might be. Armarouge, I would put somewhere between better than expected and did its job if there was a tier between these two. Given what happened after our transactions, I'm actually just going to put it in the did its job tier, because there are a lot better fire psychic types than Armarouge, sadly. I think in theory, Armarouge as a Terra Captain is very hard to beat, just because Terra Fire, what's your switch into an Armor Cannon? It has good Terra types in like Terra Fighting, Terra Fairy, Terra Grass even, to help it kind of flip around its weaknesses, help it deal with certain threats, and make it really threatening. The problem is Armarouge needs to be hit to really get threatening, because that base 75 speed isn't going anywhere. And even at +2, you have to run a significant amount of speed investment on it so that it can actually outpace like Scarf threats. And if you run all that speed, you don't have all that bulk. And Armarouge's bulk, its physical defense is fine. Spadef and health alone, it really struggles to take hits. Alongside that, its coverage is decent, but a lot of the times it kind of does want that Terra Blast. I know it can run like Meteor Beam with the Power Herb, single moves, things like Solar Beam as well, but it does really want that Terra type in a lot of different places at once. And the weak armor set's fun. The Flash Fire set I thought would be decent, but even with Assault Vest, we were getting like 2-shot by Volcarona on resisted hits. So I think that Armarouge is great in theory, but I think its sibling Ceruledge is just so much better because it gets the priority, it gets the healing off of its move instead of the negative secondary effect. Ghost coverage, I think, is just generally better than psychic coverage, and close combat is just generally better than Aura Sphere, right? And I didn't ever really run Focus Blast. So yeah, Armarouge just did not really do it for me. So these were the 4 we dropped. The team was working decently with these guys. We had only lost one of our 4 games, but I really did want to mix it up. And so one of the Pokemon I picked up was Delphox. So the other being Hydrapple, which we'll talk about later. Hydrapple kind of covered everything Sinistcha did, but we needed to refill in what Armarouge did for our team. And so I took Delphox, and I took some of the weaknesses of Armarouge into consideration when I drafted Delphox. Delphox was a lot cheaper, especially without being a Terra Captain, so that was a big plus. But not only that, Delphox is faster. It gets a lot more in utility. It gets the screens, which I think Armarouge also gets. It gets Mystical Fire, it gets Encore, it gets just so many more tools, and part of that's because it's an older Pokemon. But just in general, I think I really enjoyed Delphox. I thought it was fantastic. I think I brought it to all 3 of my playoff games. I haven't really been talking stats. We can go over those shortly. Obviously, Electros and Sinistcha never came to a matchup. Let's see. Dewpider went 0-1 in 1 game. As we mentioned, Armarouge got 3 kills and had 2 deaths in 4 games. So I think all 3 of those were in week 1, actually. So Armarouge did something week 1. And at worst, it knocked a Mamoswine to Sash and may have hit the field in the other games, but otherwise, not great. Delphox, on the other hand, we brought it to 4 games and it got 4 KOs. So it picked up more KOs than Armarouge, and it only got KO'd once. Is that real? It only got KO'd in the finals game. That's kind of outstanding, and I might have done the math wrong. I just have a sheet on the side that I was keeping up with all the stats. But if that's true, that's kind of awesome that Delphox was that potent. A couple sets on it I wish I'd gotten to use that I didn't get to. It's like Wish Passing, Heavy Duty Boots would have been cool, more of a defensive set. Offensive with like specs is always fun. Just the speed is good enough. I did enjoy the sets I did run though. I really do like Flame Charge. I liked Mystical Fire as a way to get around Terrapagos by popping its shell and making it weaker, so I thought that was cool. Just a lot of fun with this Pokemon. I'd say it very much fits my playstyle of being flexible, being able to be both a support utility and an offensive mon where it's needed, while not being the most offensive in the world. So this team was heavily inspired by the kitchen. They helped me draft a lot of these Pokemon, and I can definitely say my comfort level was a little lower than average with some of them, so I think that showed in the team building and the battles. Next up, we got Lycanroc-Dusk, which I would say personally did better than expected because it's expensive for a pure rock type with paper thin defenses. And I thought it did well. Unfortunately, it didn't show up for the last several weeks at all. Like, I considered it for 2 of the 3 playoff games. The problem is that our opponents could just outbulk us, and Lycanroc kind of has to run Life Orb or Choice Band, and, you know, burns itself out very quickly. If there's a single Resist Berry on the other team, then Lycanroc just gets KO'd by a gust of wind. So I think it's really, really good offensively. Excel Rock you cannot understate how strong a priority rock move is into a meta with a ton of rock weak Pokemon and a bunch of Pokemon that rely on things like Sashes or living on low health. So I think that alone is fantastic. I think close combat Psychic Fangs is all you ever really need to run on. I know we ran 4 rock moves on it at one point, which was pretty funny on a Choice Band set into an opponent with no rock resists. But yeah, it's a good Pokemon. I was surprised we actually got to pull off the Endeavor Taunt Stealth Rock set week 1 immediately, which was kind of cool. And then it's kind of just been an offensive backbone for us. We brought it to 5 games and it got 6 KOs in those 5 games while getting KO'd itself 3 times. So not bad. I would say, you know, 2 KOs or about 1 KO per game, but 2 KOs per death is pretty good. I think the Swords Dance set is cool. I wish it was a little bulkier, so bulk up would work on it. I like the idea of Trailblaze on it to get it faster than opposing Scarfers and get it faster than a lot of those Pokemon around like the base 120, base 130 range, so that it doesn't have to rely on Excel Rock as hard. And yeah, I enjoyed using it. I mean, honestly, I would use it again. I would put it in the tier, but I don't think it was quite amazing because I think a lot of times we missed out on KOs with it, or we just didn't really utilize it as well as we wanted to. Next up, we've got our one Terra Captain that hung around all season, Ursaring. Honestly, several times considered dropping this for Girder, if we're being honest with ourselves, because Girder does a very similar thing, but Girder can't boost its speed, but Girder can defog and does have priority and kind of recovery with Drain Punch. I'm putting Ursaring in the Dittish job, and that's it tier. That being said, Ursaring is a fantastic Terra Captain. It is about the most straightforward Pokemon you could ever prep with, because you run Bulk or you run Max Attack, you run Eviolite or you run a statusing orb, whether Flame or you would run Toxic Orb for Quick Feet, but otherwise you'd want Flame Orb for Guts because you just take less damage if you stay in for multiple turns. And that's kind of it. I mean, the bread and butter sets are 4 attacks, with one of those usually being Trailblaze. You can run Bulk Up or Swords Dance. And on the Eviolite sets, you kind of run Rest Talk with either Setup and 1 attack, which is hard to fit 1 attack against a lot of these teams, or 2 attacks Rest Talk, which means you can't boost. My problem with Ursaring this whole season, I loved it. I thought it was so strong. I think it KO'd Regieleki from full behind a Reflect. It like pretty much 2-hit KO'd Clefable behind a Reflect, which is nuts. It ended up going to 4 games. We brought it against the Spectro team in semis, and then other than that, we brought it week 1, and I couldn't tell you off the top of my head where else it came. It got 4 kills, 3 deaths. So 3 of the 4 KOs were week 1. So it had not a great performance coming into 3 games, only getting 1 KO and getting knocked out for all 3 games at some point. So my problem with Ursaring is it lacks just a couple of tools that Ursaluna gets. It does not get Drain Punch, which means it has absolutely no way to heal without using Rest. Not regarding like Wish or Grassy Terrain or things that teammates can grant it. It gets absolutely no way to keep itself healthy, which is a struggle. It also gets no way to set up its offenses while attacking. So I miss the move Power Up Punch. I used to love Power Up Punch. I think a Terra Ghost Shadow Claw Power Up Punch Rest Talk set would have went crazy into a couple of the games we had this season. Mind games with Terra Ghost, since we're already a normal type. And then other than that, I don't know. I just really want to be able to boost while not being forced into a single attacking move, which was just always the hard part of using Ursaring. I think it did decent. I remember we like did a lot of damage to a Skarmory with a +2 Thunder Punch at one point, which was pretty sick. Ursaring's a good Pokemon. I think Eviolite has really given a lot of life back into something that's been seen as kind of an underwhelming Guts attacker, you know, very one-dimensional. So I'm happy that at least it got an evolution so it can have that. But I just think that it needs a little bit more. And I know it already gets every coverage move under the sun, but it just needs Drain Punch or something, some way to heal itself. Next up, we've got Sableye. And I would put Sableye in better than expected, personally. I think Sableye, for a 3-pointer, did really well for us. Like, I really appreciated it. I can't remember at this point, but when I was doing our trades, there was a Pokemon that was 1 or 2 more expensive than Delphox that I was going to pick up instead if I could find the room to trade for it. If Morgrem had been open, I would have traded Sableye for Morgrem. And I think that would have been a pretty big mistake, if we're being honest. Because it would have been our screen setter, it would have had Parting Shot, but it doesn't have a lot of the other tools Sableye had, and we saw some of those tools come in. Sableye actually did get a KO on a Thundurus, switching in on it once, which was pretty cool with Nightshade. Otherwise, it came to 4 games, and it died 3 of those games. We pretty much always ran Encore. We had either screens or statusing moves, and usually 1 attack. It was a pretty straightforward mon to prep with. Honestly, sometimes we just needed a Ghost, and I didn't want to run Ghost Terra on either of our Terra Captains. And there's not really much else to say about Sableye, unfortunately. I think that at the end of the day, it's a great budget Prankster pick. I really like Prankster because it stops very straightforward sweepers from fully sweeping. You can Encore them when they set up, or you can paralyze them, slow them down, burn them. You know, you have a ton of options with it to stop Pokemon from beating you. And I think that is very valuable on its own. So, Sableye, good Pokemon, especially if you only have a couple points and you need a Ghost type. It's a good spin blocker, or at least a decent one, because its stats are obviously atrocious. They're absolute dumpster fire. But it is a Pokemon is decent enough as it is. And hey, its Mega's coming back soon, so maybe that'll breathe new life into it. Maybe it'll get some new abilities, moves, something. Next up, Gliscor. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Gliscor was very disappointing for me. Obviously, I'm going to put it over Sinistcha because it actually did have to come to some games. But I did appreciate very little about it, to be honest. And I know why. It was overpriced in this league because it was allowed to Terra. And I opted to not make it a Terra captain, unfortunately. Maybe my own personal problem with the drafting. I would have preferred Landorus in this slot, to be honest. When I was building the team, I was like, Landorus is the absolute perfect Pokemon for this team. But I didn't take it because I've used Landorus so much this generation already. I wanted to switch it up. And the only real way to switch it up is Gliscor. The only other option would be Gligar, which is obviously not even close to the same league. But I really needed that specific typing. The problem with Gliscor is it is incredibly limited by its item. It needs that Poison Orb to be decent, because otherwise it's relatively fast, relatively bulky on defense, but its Spadef and its attack are not good. Like, it's so underwhelming with stats in this generation. And it can't just run a Yachi Berry or a Rocky Helmet or, you know, any of those other useful items that you see on Landorus a lot. So I don't know. I was not into it. It gets the same pivoting options, but our opponents all just ran tons of ice coverage. We saw skill swap to Toxic Orbit. Just way too many problems with this guy. I hate item lock Pokemon. I try not to run them if at all possible. And Gliscor is about as close to an item lock Pokemon as you can get without actually being item locked. So this was like my old favorite Pokemon when I got into draft way back when, like 10 plus years ago. Gliscor was like my favorite, my go-to. I would pick it up every single time. And now I kind of see it as a little bit of noob bait. I've seen it do well with Terra normal facades. It goes crazy, and just Terra water to be incredibly annoying and bulky. Terra Fairy as well. I think it's amazing. The problem is I didn't have that luxury because I didn't prep in a way to set it up for Terra, and that's on me. I didn't do that well with it. It ended up coming to only 4 games, even though it was like our 3rd or 4th most expensive Pokemon. And it got 3 KOs and got KO'd 3 times. So pretty underwhelming in general. The only thing I can say about it is it did force a ton of prep. It forced a ton of people to bring ice type coverage against us. And when I didn't have Gliscor, the ice type coverage kind of went to waste. We had Roaring Moon and we had Hydrapple in the later weeks. But as soon as Hydrapple Terras, then suddenly ice is kind of useless into our team. So at least we're making people waste their move slots. Next up, we have got Muck. And this is the one that I'm not really sure where I want him to go. Because with my prep, I think he did his job. But if I had prepped just a little bit better, I think he would be better than I would have expected him to do. So I'm going to put him actually at the top of the did his job tier. I'm going to put Ursaring right behind him. And then I'm going to put Armarouge at least above Eelektrik. So yeah, that's kind of what we're rocking with. Muck as a physical like setup mon, I wanted Curse to work so many times. Could never find an opportunity for it. There was just too much to deal with on the opposing teams, and Muck, unfortunately, is a Gen 1 Pokemon, and those stats just don't really keep up. Is a good specially defensive poison type, if nothing else. I think it, in its own, is our Toxic Spike Absorber was okay. That's why we brought it to finals, and our opponent didn't bring T-Spikes, so that was a little bit of a whiff on my part. The problem is it wants coverage, it wants healing, and it wants its utility moves, but it's missing just certain moves that you would think it would get. Like, it gets Haze, but it doesn't get Clear Smog, so you can't clear opposing stats if you're running an Assault Vest. And then, like, I ran Rocky Helmet on it, and it's, even with a bunch of physical defense investment, I was still getting almost 2-shot by a Foul Play, which is just crazy. Like, its attack stat relatively high, but just, I don't know, that calc was weird. I was not expecting that to do as much as it did. We only brought it a couple times, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, we brought it to 3 games. It got 4 KOs and got KO'd 3 times, so a little bit in the positive at least. I really wish I had ran Rock Slide against Volcarona. I know we missed out on most of our poison touches. I think I only ran poison touch this season, and we only ever got like 1 poison with it, which is like a little bit insulting. If you're gonna run a 30% chance ability, that kind of felt like we were just running no ability on it at the end of the day. And so that wasn't great. And honestly, for that, it's getting demoted. It's going under Ursaring. Just frustrating because I think it was decent enough. It did the job. It was almost wheezing, but I think a lot of the time when we had our poison type, we wanted it to be able to take special moves, not physical moves. So in that regard alone, I think it worked. But I think there were a couple matchups I would have liked a wheezing. So maybe in the next time, or if I could do it again, I would probably take wheezing instead. Okay, we're on to our heavy hitters. We're on to our 4 like big expensive Pokemon. First up, Roaring Moon. Whoa, I clicked an ad. Don't look at that. Roaring Moon is our first, and this one's pretty contentious. I left it out of 2 games because it was so bad offensively. It was so likely to get statused by a bird, you know, like Flame Body or Static. It was so likely to just absolutely walled out by fairy types. If people didn't run ice coverage, they were running fairy coverage. I'm going to put it in the did its job tier at the top because it did do its job. It did damage. It cleaned up games with weakness policy. We ran Assault Vest on it, and it did decently there. Roaring Moon, a lot of people like to call it Roaring Mid, say it's not worth the price, even though it's insanely strong and pretty fast. I think my problem was this was my capstone Pokemon. This was my top of my speed tier. And 119 in an Ubers League is not that fast, sadly. And it being reliant on booster energy or otherwise losing its item before it can use its flying type coverage definitely makes it more difficult to use because then fightings become just relatively free to switch in on it. Obviously, fairies are an ever present problem. Ironhead is rarely knocking out fairies, even with its attack stat, even with a booster, sometimes even with a +1. Pokemon were easily able to kind of shrug off its hits. So, really gets hard walled by fairies. We had ways to counter them, of course, but at the end of the day, our plan was Roaring Moon forces things to show up that don't want to see Magearna, and then Magearna takes advantage. I think it did that, which is why it's in the did its job tier. But otherwise, Roaring Moon is so one-dimensional. It's just a physical attacker. It just sets up where it just like kind of takes hits, but not really. The one set I was surprised with this season was the physically defensive set. Being able to absolutely devour hits was pretty cool. Like at base, I think you look at the calc of Roaring Moon into something like a Chen Pal, and you're like, that thing's never gonna live a hit. That defense is way too low. But all you got to do is invest like 200 in your defense, get rid of some of your speed, some of your attack, and suddenly you're taking way better hits than you expected. So I think I would have explored that more had I found out about that sooner than like quarterfinals or whenever I found out about that. Next up, we've got Quaquaval. This is the first of 3 contenders for MVP. Quaquaval, I would say, is amazing, at least. It may end up moving to MVP. We'll talk about it. Oh, and then regarding Roaring Moon came to 9 games and got 8 KOs, along with getting KO'd 5 times. So, decent KD, not anything crazy. It's probably worth noting, I was number 1 in the standings for this league in the regular season. I was plus 18 differential, 6-2. But I had like no Pokemon in the kill leaders. I think Quaquaval snuck in last minute because it had a 5-0 victory. But otherwise, the kill lead feed was never. I think I had it week 1. Both my Terracaps, Armarouge, and Ursaring were on it. And then from then on, I've spread out my KOs so evenly that nothing stood out, which in my opinion is a sign of a decent team, but also means you don't really have anything that your opponents are super scared of. But if people are going to be scared of something, it's probably going to be Quaquaval. So this was kind of what I wanted as kind of early removal, because if I don't get removal early, sometimes I don't barely get it at all. So I wanted to grab that early, and I thought it went really well thematically with Magearna, because Magearna gets boost to its special attack when it gets KOs, and Quaquaval gets boost to its physical attacks when it gets KOs. So I really like kind of I don't want to call it synergy, but just kind of striking the fear into the opponent that if you let me get out of hand with either of these Pokemon, they're just going to run away with the game and you can't do much about it. Both of them can so easily boost their speed, or in Magearna's case, it can just Trick Room. So I just really like that thematically. I've used Quaquaval, I think this is my 3rd draft using it, and it has never disappointed, to be honest. There is one thing about Quaquaval that disappoints me. There are actually a couple moves that it doesn't get that it should get. The big one for me is Drain Punch. I don't know why Quaquaval doesn't get Drain Punch, but I want to run it bulky a lot of the time. I really like bulk up sets where it can heal. We try to run it in finals. If we had had Drain Punch as an option, it probably would have been there over Roost, and we would have actually had a way to combat and 1v1 the Zamazenta, and we may actually win that 1v1 in the end, assuming no crits. But I think that would have actually been so much better. I really, really, really miss Drain Punch. I like having a fighting type that can heal itself. Obviously, I've already complained about it on Ursaring, so not having a way to both heal and deal damage is something that I am not a fan of. Quaquaval, very good Pokemon otherwise, so it gets Aqua Step, Wave Crash, Roost. I think a move that you don't see on it very much is Encore, but you can Encore opponents into random things and set up right in front of them, and it is so good. I think, honestly, if we had waited to Encore on that Screamtail that we had battled against, I think we actually stood a much better chance of winning that game. Or if we had run something like Weakness Policy, maybe if we had actually been able to run Drain Punch, maybe we could have fit Weakness Policy. Regardless, Quaquaval is a fantastic Pokemon. It's the only Pokemon we ever cleanly swept a game with. It went absolutely crazy in our game against Jakib, I believe, our week 8. So really carried us there. It's a very strong water type. I mean, I could speak this thing's praises forever. But worth noting, it was our only removal, which is a big demerit for me and my drafting ability because I didn't pick up any removal anywhere else ever. And I know in Scarlet and Violet, removal's a little bit of a meme. You don't really run it that often because almost nothing gets it. And if you draft something for the removal, you're paying too much for a Pokemon that's otherwise worse. So I just had Quaquaval here with Rapid Spin to kind of help us control hazards. I know I had to run it sometimes over other moves, and I would definitely draft secondary removal with it in the future. So if you draft Quaquaval, I would recommend something else, being able to spin or defog or whatever, get rid of hazards in some way. Otherwise, though, highly recommend Quaquaval. Next up, we are going to talk about the Hydrapple, and I'm going to be honest with you. I am so sure that Hydrapple was our MVP. When we had this original team, if you take away the Delphox and you take away the Hydrapple and you just look at this original team, our defensive pivoting was not good, especially with Eel. Eel was our main defensive pivot. That's so bad. We had very little. We had U-turn on Roaring Moon, but it's so fast. We had flip turn on Quaquaval, but it's relatively fast, and we would want it to set up, right? We wanted to win games. We have Gliscor that's also relatively fast with U-turn. We didn't really have the slow pivot we needed to get Pokemon like Magearna in and let them set up and threaten things, to get our frail Pokemon like Lycanroc in, and to get Armarouge in without taking an extra hit so that it could set up and get a speed boost in the same turn. We never had that. That was a big drafting error on my part. I'm not saying I would take Alomomola, but in a nutshell, Alomomola would have really kind of patched this team up. Something that's slow and pivots. In the end, when we eventually traded for Hydrapple, we finally had that slow pivot, and we could tell. You could feel the difference it was making. I didn't mention Quaquaval's stats. I keep being one Pokemon behind. Quaquaval came to 10 of 11 games. I only didn't bring it to 1, and that was a rematch we had in playoffs. I ended up bringing it anyway, so that worked out pretty well. 9 KOs, 5 deaths. 5 of the KOs were in 1 game, so it would have went 4 and 5 otherwise. People were prepping really well for the sweeps, honestly. And looking back, before we get to Hydrapple, also, Delphox, I just want to speak to it again. I think I had 3 people mention they never expected Delphox to show up, just for it to show up and actually do a lot of work. So another merit for it. I absolutely loved when the low tiers pop off. And to an extent, that's kind of what Hydrapple did here. If you all haven't used Hydrapple before, on paper, it doesn't look that good. Its stats are good. It's bulky other than Spadef, and you throw on an Assault Vest, and that's fine. It's relatively slow, but it really doesn't matter. And it gets regenerated, right? So it's kind of the perfect Assault Vest Pokemon, but it also gets tools like Nasty Plot. It also gets Yawn, Recover even. It could be bulky without having to switch out. And honestly, it's kind of the perfect storm when you give it Terra, and you get rid of that Ice weakness and the other weaknesses that it's kind of just hanging out with. It's so good. I don't know that it lived so many hits on 4 or 5%, right? It did so much damage to opponents. It hit perfectly timed Fickle Beams. I just think it's such a good Pokemon with Terra. You don't need much else. And me saying this, my grass types, I really like it when they get Leech Seed. I love the move Leech Seed because I feel like it grants you so much momentum, gives you switching initiative. I think there's a lot of really good things about Leech Seed. So I normally like that on my grass type. But Hydrapple doesn't get it. And I didn't mind at all. I thought it was fantastic regardless. I wish it was just a little bit faster. That 44, you run into a lot of base 50 speed Pokemon. So you either have to invest relatively heavily because you always want stats in all its bulk, or you just kind of accept that you're going to be slower than everything. But at least it's pressuring those base 50s to maybe run some speed, which is nice because it takes it out of their bulk and offense. So in the end of the day, I have like no complaints about Hydrapple. I think we ran a multitude of types on it too. I know we ran Ghost. We definitely ran Fairy, probably at least twice. Oh, Terra Bug. Absolutely adored running Terra Bug on this guy. I thought that was very funny. That it just happened to be our ground top resist and immunity when Gliscor didn't show up. Because yeah, look at how badly prepped this team is. Everything gets two-shot by Earthquake. I don't think enough people took advantage of that, if we're being honest with ourselves. Because without this guy, our Earthquake switch-ins consisted of Gliscor and Hydrapple, and that was it. And somehow we didn't get Earthquake spam to death at all, ever, which is pretty funny. Regardless, I do think Terra Bug Hydrapple is cool. Obviously, Fire and Poison to give us a Fairy resist was nice when we didn't mind being weak to ground. Terra Water would have made a lot of sense some weeks, but we ended up not running that. I know we ran Terra Stellar on Ursaring once, which was funny, but we didn't end up getting to see it. But just in general, this guy is one of the best Terra captains you can get when things at like the Zarude level are banned. I think this, you're never going to go wrong with Terra Hydrapple because it keeps itself healthy with Giga Drain, Recover, and Regenerator. Draco Meteor and Fickle Beam, both moves at really no drawback. I always ran Fickle Beam over Draco just because I would rather get some damage than none, and I'll take that 30% to double my damage and be stronger than a Draco over a 10% to do 0 damage at all. Because as you've seen in some of our games, we're not the luckiest trainer in the world. We definitely have bad luck a lot of the time, I would say. And so I enjoyed using Hydrapple, but I was so scared of using anything that could mess with it. And that goes for all these Pokemon, things like Focus Blast on Delphox. I could never bring myself to run just because I know we're going to miss 3 in a row, you know? So some of the limitations of the team are due to my lack of running certain moves. Things like Stone Edge on Lycanroc, I just don't want to whiff, you know, Focus Blast, etc. There's just moves that I don't really use and that limits my potential as a trainer, I guess. But also, I would rather hit a move and barely lose than probably miss and be frustrated anyway that I could have got a crit with a Rock Slide over, you know, landing a Stone Edge. Anyway, all that aside, Hydrapple, fantastic Pokemon, drafted. It gets just enough coverage, just enough utility to come to every game. Every game I prepped with it, it was the first one to show up. It came to 7 games, got 10 KOs, and only dropped 3 times. And one of those was finals, of course. So carrying the team on its back for the pivoting. Last up, we have our team captain, #1 pick overall. We were picked #1 in the draft, and we took Magearna over a lot of other threatening options. Had I not gotten Magearna, I probably would have went with... I kind of wanted to play out Palkia Origin, but I know that it was item locked, so I'm never a big fan of that. But there were a couple other Ubers I considered. I didn't think I was going to get Magearna, and I got Magearna. And I adore this Pokemon. I would put it in the better than expected tier. I'm going to move Lycanroc above Dewpider, actually, and Sableye. Magearna is going to be in the top of the better than expected tier just because it's our Uber. And if we looked at stats, it came to all 11 games. We never left it on the bench because that would be dumb. And it's 9 and 5 KD. So Hydrapple had more KOs than Magearna. And we had Hydrapple on the team for so much less time. The other thing about Magearna, I don't think we had a KO with it until like week 5, week 6. That is fully my user error. Well, not fully. It's partially my user error. Partially everyone was prepping like crazy to never let Magearna get a KO. Because as soon as Magearna gets a KO, it runs away with games. And our opponents, you know, correctly addressed that. All of our opponents did a great job of prepping for it. So I think Magearna as a whole, you know, there's not a whole lot bad you can say about it. It's a Fairy Steel type, but unlike Klefki and things like Tinkaton, it actually pressures immediate offense. It's a fantastic Pokemon that can set up in multiple ways. It gets Iron Defense, it gets Shift Gear, Calm Mind. It sets up on its own through attacking. It gets all the coverage you would need outside of... It doesn't really ever have a good way to hit fire types. It doesn't get any kind of rock coverage, ground coverage. Obviously can't Terra, no water coverage. So that was the one thing I found while prepping, was there were a surprising amount of fire types that just kind of brick-walled me. Luckily we had Quaquaval for that, but if they had Flame Body, then suddenly they're even more annoying. Regardless though, Magearna is a fantastic Pokemon. I found myself running the Draining Kiss sets, like the bulkier setup sets, more often than I was running like Scarfed or Specs, just because I thought if we wanted to set up and run away with games, we might as well do that instead of trying to do it with like a scarf. And we kind of got burned earlier on. I think I ran a scarf for spec somewhere, and it ended up just not doing anything, unfortunately. They're not doing enough for being our most expensive, top pick Pokemon. At the end of the day, I did want it to kind of synergize with everything else, and I think it did that, especially if you look at those top four. I think they were fantastic synergy. I think that Fire, Water, Grass core with the Magearna, and then the Double Dragon, even. Like, those top four Pokemon are Fire, Water, Grass, and Dragon, Fairy, Steel core. I know those are antiquated terms at this point. Those are not at all required to have a solid draft, and some of those types are not even that relevant. But in general, having them on this team was pretty nice. Just those four operated so well together that we kind of filled out our team with non-meta picks. I will say, if I had gotten to choose any Pokemon for my round 2 pick, it would have been Terra Crown, which would have drastically changed the course of this team because, that's double steel type. I love doubling up on the more impressive types. Obviously, we had 2 dragons here, but 2 steel types would have went absolutely insane. Crown would have been our setup mon, and then Magearna would have been more free. Or actually, they both would have been flexible to run. 1 run specs, 1 run setup, right? And our opponent would have to play guessing games on who does what. Unfortunately, Crep did the right thing and analyzed how good of a Pokemon Terra Crown was and took it as fast as they could, which left us taking kind of the second best Pokemon at the time, which was Roaring Moon, and I would say it ended up disappointing compared to what other picks would have done. If I could do it again, maybe I would do Magearna, Quaquaval, and Landorus as our third pick because it was available at the time, and then we would have a more cohesive team. We wouldn't be as disappointed by Gliscor. And I think Landorus would have rounded out this team just a little bit better. I would have put more speed somewhere. My OG plan was no Ursaring, and I would have instead had a Jolteon on the team because that would have been that 130 base speed. It would have been our secondary Terra Captain. Honestly, I wanted screens because we have so much setup. I wanted a really fast screen setter, and that's kind of where Sableye came in. It's technically a fast screen setter because Prankster, but it doesn't really have any offensive threat. It just threatens Encore, so there was always that little bit of worry of Prankster immune Pokemon on the other side, like a Dark type. So that's kind of where we're at. That was our team for UNPL. That's kind of how I feel about it. Let me know in the comments kind of how you feel about the team, what you think I could have done differently. Because I think at the end of the day, once I got to my finals battle, it was just kind of like I was done with the team. Let's say that. I had played well enough with all of the limits that I was kind of tired of prepping, knowing the limitations of the team instead of excited to build around all these different Pokemon. At the end of the day, I was only really appreciating these top 4. So saying that, I'll put Magearna in the bottom of amazing, just to really differentiate. Those top 4 were so much better than the rest of the draft. There should be a tier between them, and I would definitely build around these 4 again any day. So yeah, that's kind of the team. Let me know what you think, and I guess we'll see you in the next league.